the beginning of the fabulous Las Vegas Strip, which became the entertainment capital of America.
The dashing, trigger-happy Benjamin Siegel, better known as Bugsy, was as charming as he was murderous. In the 1940s, the New York mob sent Bugsy to L.A., where he muscled in on the rackets and hobnobbed with movie stars. Then he fell for the beautiful mob girl, Virginia Hill. It was the most famous romance in the history of organized crime.
Lust, I would call it. Lust and obsession with one another.
Bugsy used his charm and millions of dollars from the mafia on the gamble of a lifetime. He gained control of a Las Vegas resort and casino called the Flamingo. Only Bugsy was way out of his league. His forte was murder, not business, and it showed.
He was a stubborn mob boss. He didn't know what he was doing, and he made every mistake, you can believe.
Bugsy was in tight with the highest-ranking mobsters in the country, but that didn't save him when the mob decided that Bugsy was a bad bet. Benjamin Hyman Siegel was born in New York City on February 28, 1906. His parents, both Jewish immigrants from Austria, raised their 5 children in a cramped, rat-infested tenement in Brooklyn, just over the bridge from the crime-ridden Lower East Side of Manhattan. Escape from the squalid conditions became paramount to the Siegel children, most of whom did their best to get ahead through working hard in school. But little Benny Siegel preferred the streets to the classroom.
Ben was not of a disposition to want to go to school and try to get an education and get an ordinary job. Whatever it is he wanted to achieve, that route was much too slow for him. And I think that's what pushed him into an early life of crime.
Benny, a stocky kid not yet 10, became a denizen of the bustling streets of the Lower East Side, a battleground for rival gangs of young Italian, Irish, and Jewish hoodlums who made fast money by shaking down pushcart vendors. Benny quickly grabbed his own piece of the action.
They would do little protection games. They'd push over the pushcarts, and then they'd tell them, if you don't want the pushcarts bothered, give us $1 each, things like that.
A little cash and the rush of power made these young punks hungry for more. They copied the older gangsters and organized their own crap games right on the streets.
Have it under the street light at night and up an alleyway in the daytime. And you learned that if you wanted to run the game, you made more money than if you participated in the game. So entrepreneurship in the world of crime was something that they came by very easily.
By his late teens, Ben Siegel was a tough but small-time thug until one day a scrawny Jewish kid named Meyer Lansky stumbled upon him in a street fight, grappling over a gun.
There was whistles, the police were arriving. And Benny seemed fixated on getting hold of this gun. He wasn't going to let go of it. He didn't seem to notice what was happening around him. And Meyer always took credit for taking him aside, saying, come, you've got to go. And he was totally ungrateful for this. As they ran off into the stalls, he said, I needed that gun. And somehow couldn't get over the fact that he'd left it lying on the ground.
A friendship was born between the street-smart Meyer and Ben, whose growing reputation for violence set him apart from other young crooks of the day.
Benny was a one-man army. That's what they said about him. Benny was fearless. He was a little bit crazy. That's why the name, Bug.
People in the Lower East Side said he was crazier than a bedbug.
So Bug became Bugsy. You know that guy, he's Bugsy, and so on. But as he made his way up, no one would use that name to his face.
The New York City underworld soon became acquainted with the odd couple of Siegel and Lansky, and the pair decided to start their own gang.
And he and Meyer Lansky started a thing pretty quick called the Bug-Meyer gang, in which they did burglaries, they did, hold-ups, they did all that sort of thing,
Ben was the muscle that Meyer could use. Meyer was the brains when it came to some of the business activities.
The Bug and Meyer gang also made money by fencing furs, jewelry, and cars. Then the U.S. government dropped a money-making scheme right into their lap: prohibition. Supplying the illegal booze? Gangsters all over America. One of the biggest, Arnold Rothstein, was best known for fixing the 1919 World Series. He knew a golden opportunity when he saw one. Rothstein began to recruit promising young criminals to run his bootlegging operation for him. Bugsy and Meyer were among the first chosen. As a front, they set up a truck rental garage in Manhattan. The trucks would come and go at all hours, filled with booze.
Prohibition meant, for the young criminals who were involved, was that America was compelling them to become businessmen. Businessmen of crime, but businessmen nonetheless.
By age 21, Bugsy was already a success. In spite of a rap sheet that included charges of assault, drug dealing, white slavery, bootlegging, hijacking, robbery, bookmaking, and murder. None of the charges ever stuck, since Bugsy was in with the big-time bosses like Arnold Rothstein, who knew the magic power of the payoff. Bugsy flaunted his freedom and his newfound wealth, the kind of wealth that few of his buddies from the ghetto could match by obeying the law. With his money, Bugsy bought class, starting with an apartment in the fanciest hotel in New York City.
Ben went to the smart new place, the Waldorf Astoria, where he could see and be seen, where he would eat breakfast, where he would go to the barber shop, and could be seen by the world.
Bugsy's new image was fortified by his movie star good looks and a charisma that beguiled the broads and masked the violence always lurking just below the surface.
They called him Baby Blue Eyes. They called him Bedroom Eyes. Every woman that met him just went crazy about him. But they were all, like, afraid of him.
He was about 5'10" or 5'11". His stomach was flat as a tabletop. He was in some shape. He worked out every day.
In 1929, Bugsy singled out one of those drawn to his good looks, a dark-haired Jewish girl named Esther Krakauer. Bugsy used his marriage to build the appearance of respectability. He bought a Tudor-style house in Scarsdale, a pretty, quiet town just outside the city, where he and Esther could raise a family.
He had to be among the first Jewish people who could say that they lived in Scarsdale. This was an upper middle class residential neighborhood that frowned on anyone who wasn't a WASP. Yet Ben broke that barrier.
Bugsy had 2 daughters and split his life between his secret work in the city and his family in the suburbs. But he seemed like any other commuting breadwinner.
You would not know that, that they're necessarily gangsters. They just were guys who all day long did what other people did, but then you can imagine what they were doing in the 30s and 40s when they were working. Work to them meant killing people, beating them up, and then they go and have dinner.
Ben did what most organized crime people do. They become the total schizophrenics. Wife, children, that's one world. This is business. And never shall the two meet.
Business got even better as Bugsy and Meyer shrewdly linked their fates to another young, up-and-coming gangster named Charles Lucky Luciano. The sharp-dressing Charlie Lucky had worked his way up in the Italian mob by carving out a niche in drugs and prostitution. But the ambitious Luciano was running into a major roadblock.
Young gangsters like Lucky Luciano found their way blocked by an older generation. Not really in terms of power. It was just their ability to do business in a rational American way was being frustrated by these old men. And it seems pretty clear that Luciano decided that these old guys, the mustache Petes, would have to go.
In the early 1930s, 2 powerhouses of that old generation, Salvatore Maranzano and Joe the Boss Masseria, were fighting a bloody street war for control of the New York mob. But they were too busy clashing to notice they were cramping the style of Lucky Luciano. In April 1931, Lucky lured Joe the Boss to Scarpato's restaurant in Coney Island. As Luciano excused himself from the table, 4 men walked in and shot Masseria 4 times in the head, killing him. With Joe the Boss out of the way, Joe's rival, Maranzano, took control, but not for long.
He had an office in a building right behind Grand Central Terminal, staffed with bodyguards, and Lucky Luciano decided Maranzano would have to be killed. But it'd be very difficult for his men to get close.
The best evidence is that it was Jewish hitmen that they recruited to do the shooting, and that Benny Siegel was one of these.
And they went up there just as cops were allowed in, and they killed them.
With the death of the last big old timer, Lucky started running the mob like a modern corporation. He created the Commission, a governing body of mob bosses, a kind of board of directors, presiding over rackets such as bootlegging and prostitution. Lucky even let Jews, including Bugsy and Meyer, get a piece of the action.
His standard was going to be, can I make money with these fellows? If so, I don't care if they're Irish, I don't care if they're Jewish. Can I trust them, and can we make money together?
Their ethic was very much the ethic that had made American business great, except they were prepared to break laws and, where necessary, to back up what they wanted with violence. And Ben had this ability to intimidate people. Now that, of course, is a very useful talent in business.
Because Bugsy had a natural aptitude for violence, he became a leader in the mob's very own assassination department, a notorious group of paid killers who became known in the press as Murder Incorporated.
They did the murders that they were instructed to do by the leading gangsters in Manhattan. When some violence had to be undertaken, Ben could have dispatched 5 of his men to do it. But he wouldn't dispatch them. He joined them and he would lead them. I think he enjoyed the violence to a very considerable degree.
But Bugsy's New York days were numbered. In 1935, Special Prosecutor Thomas Dewey launched a crusade against organized crime. His primary target was Bugsy's well-known boss, Lucky Luciano. Dewey nailed Lucky on charges of extorting prostitutes. The law was getting uncomfortably close to Bugsy, who, like his boss, made the mistake of basking in the limelight a bit too much.
He loved dressing sharply. We see it in his photographs. Houndstooth check, flamboyant ties. It was, of course, very dangerous. And what happened to Luciano showed it was dangerous.
There was another reason for Bugsy to make a change. The repeal of Prohibition in 1933 had signaled an end to the mob's biggest source of illegal revenue.
So they had to look for more fertile fields. And the thing that was coming along right around the time Prohibition ended, the early 30s, was gambling.
Bugsy's friend Meyer headed to Havana to lay low and to perfect his skills in the booming casino racket. But not Bugsy. For the dashing gangster with the celebrity good looks, the only place to be was Hollywood. The glitz and glamour of Hollywood, the guile and good looks of Bugsy Siegel. It was a perfect match. With his handsome face and the power of the New York mob behind him, Bugsy was dispatched to L.A. His mission? To muscle in on the West Coast rackets.
It was really rather daring of Siegel to come into Los Angeles and try and create some space for himself and his own associates. He seems to have done it with a combination of business and just crude violence and intimidation.
It wasn't long before Bugsy gained control. First of the bookmaking rackets, then prostitution and narcotics. He went on a spending spree, greasing the palms of police and politicians, buying a Hollywood estate and picking up tabs at the finest Hollywood hangouts. He was a master at mixing business and pleasure on a grand scale.
He was handsome, he was attractive to women, he could slap men on